I remember the exact moment I died. I was wearing my favorite floral dress, the one I reserved only for Sundays. My Bible was resting on my lap, and the choir was halfway through How Great Thou Art when I slumped forward in the pew. My body hit the wood with a dull thud. All I remember hearing before the silence was my husband's voice yelling my name, Rebecca, and the sound of running feet. Then, everything went dark. Before I take you deep into what happened next, I just want to say thank you to every single one of you who has subscribed to this channel. Your support means the world to me. And for all our new and returning viewers who have not hit that subscribe button yet, I truly cannot wait for you to do so. That simple act is the fuel that keeps this channel alive. It powers every story, every truth, and every testimony I share here. So please, make sure to like, comment, and share your thoughts down below. I read every one of them, and your voice matters more than you know. Now, back to that unforgettable Sunday morning. My name is Rebecca Caldwell. I am a 58-year-old mother of 3, a wife of 32 years, and for most of my life, I was the kind of Christian you would call all in. Church every Sunday. Bible study every Wednesday. Prayer group on Saturdays. If the doors of Grace Meadow Baptist Church were open, I was inside, singing, crying, praying. I was raised in that same church in rural Tennessee. My mother taught Sunday school there. My father helped build the steeple. That church was not just a building to me, it was my safe place, my home away from home. So, you can imagine how shocking it must sound when I tell you. Jesus told me to stop going to church. Let me explain. It was a warm spring morning. April 14th. I had just baked banana bread for the potluck we were having after service. My husband, Gerald, and I walked hand in hand from the parking lot, greeting every face with a smile. The service began as usual. The sanctuary was filled with music, laughter, and the rustle of pages turning. Then it happened. Suddenly, I could no longer hear the music. I felt pressure in my chest, like someone had placed a cinder block there. My vision blurred. I tried to stand, but my legs gave out. The next thing I knew, I was floating above my body, watching Gerald cradle me and call for help. I saw the pastor leap down from the pulpit. I watched Deacon Simmons fumble with his phone, trying to dial 911. And yet, I felt peaceful. I was not panicked. I was not afraid. I felt like I had been lifted out of the heaviness of life and set into the middle of a warm breeze. I watched as they wheeled my body out of the sanctuary. I saw my daughter collapse in tears near the altar. Still, I kept rising. The world below faded, and a soft, pulsing light surrounded me. I floated through what felt like layers of air, each one warmer than the last. The air smelled like fresh rain, like jasmine and old books. I was not walking. I was being drawn, gently, steadily, into a place I could not describe if I tried. Then I reached it, a vast, open field that shimmered with a silver glow. There were no walls, no buildings, just open space and a sense of something holy in the air. I was not alone. I could feel other presences, like whispers you hear behind a closed door. Some felt familiar. Others, distant. But I was not afraid. Then I saw him. A man stood in the distance, his back turned to me. He wore white, not like the white of wedding dresses or doctor coats, but white like lightning. Bright, pure, alive. He turned slowly. His eyes locked with mine, and everything inside me trembled. Not with fear, but with something I still struggled to explain, awe, maybe. Or recognition. He looked nothing like the paintings hanging in our church. He had the face of someone who had seen all of time, beautiful, worn, powerful, and kind. His eyes were like oceans. Deep, deep oceans. I wanted to fall into them. He did not move his lips, but I heard his voice. And it went straight through me like wind in a canyon. But what he told me, shook me to my very soul. Rebecca, the voice said. You must stop going to church. I did not understand. I tried to speak, but no words formed. I felt my soul crack with confusion. I thought I had done everything right. I had tithed. I had served. I had sung in the choir. I had loved my neighbor. So why would he say that? His words continued, slow and piercing. The church is not where I dwell. It is where many lose me while trying to find me. I felt like I had been punched in the spirit. How could that be? He raised his hand and waved it gently. In an instant, I saw visions, churches filled with people, pastors preaching, choirs singing, but beneath it, I saw hidden things. Hypocrisy. Greed. Lust. Lies. Some of the very leaders I had admired were not who they seemed. People clapping and crying on Sundays were the same ones gossiping, cheating, abusing, and living empty from Monday to Saturday. And worst of all, many had turned church into a business. They had traded truth for performance. They were feeding people entertainment instead of spiritual food. He looked at me again and said, "Your body died in the building, but your soul must awaken outside it." The field began to dim. The light faded slowly like a sunset. I wanted to stay. I wanted to ask more. But his voice grew softer as he said, "Go back. Tell them what I showed you. But be ready. Many will not listen." And then, I fell. Fell hard. And just like that, I woke up on a hospital bed with tubes in my arms and my husband holding my hand. But my heart had changed forever. The moment I opened my eyes in that hospital room, I knew I was no longer the same woman who had walked into Grace Meadow Baptist Church just hours before. The weight of what I had seen, of what I had heard, clung to me like a wet blanket. I stared at the pale blue ceiling tiles above me while my husband, Gerald, sat quietly beside the bed, clutching my hand as though he was afraid I might vanish again. The doctors called it a cardiac event, something about a drop in blood pressure and my heart stalling. To them, I had just blacked out. But I knew better. I had died. I had left my body. I had stood in a glowing place. I had looked into the eyes of Jesus, and he told me something that shattered everything I thought I knew. In the weeks that followed, I kept what happened to myself. At least, at first. I returned home and tried to slide back into the rhythm of my old life. I baked casseroles. I called my children. I smiled at neighbors and pretended everything was fine. But nothing was fine. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, hearing his voice over and over again. "Stop going to church. I am not there." My heart ached with confusion. Had it all been a lie? Had my devotion, my obedience, my faithfulness been pointed in the wrong direction? I had spent years inside that church building, raising my hands in worship, weeping at the altar, fasting and praying and serving. And now I could not even step inside the sanctuary without feeling like I was walking into a hollow shell. It was not long before Gerald noticed something was different. "You have not been back to church," he said one evening as we sat on the porch. "Not even once." I nodded slowly. "I do not think I can go back." "Why? What happened to you in that hospital, Rebecca?" I stared at the sky. The stars were out, tiny white dots scattered across an endless black canvas. I wanted to tell him everything, but the fear of being called crazy held my tongue. So I just whispered. He told me something that changed everything. Gerald did not press. He only reached for my hand and held it tight. But one night, when the silence became unbearable, I finally broke. I told him everything. I told him about the moment I left my body, about the silver field, the man in white, and the terrifying beauty in his words. I told him what Jesus said about the church, how it had become a place where many lose him while trying to find him. I described the visions I saw, pastors smiling on stage while hiding sin in their hearts, people lifting their hands in worship while judging, backbiting, and destroying others in secret. Gerald sat in stunned silence for a long time. Then he looked at me and said, "I believe you." Tears rolled down my cheeks. That was the first time I felt seen and heard. But it was just the beginning. A few nights later, I had another dream. Except it did not feel like a dream at all. It felt like I had been taken again, this time, not to a field, but through a hallway of light. I walked down a long corridor lined with windows, and each window showed a different church, some I recognized, others I did not. I paused before one window and gasped. It was our church. Grace Meadow Baptist. I saw the pews, the altar, the same dusty cross hanging above the pulpit. I saw the choir rehearsing and the pastor pacing with his Bible. But the moment I looked closer, my stomach turned. I saw things that broke me. I saw the youth pastor, Brother Michael, screaming at his wife behind closed doors. I saw Deacon Simmons, the man who prayed over my children, slipping envelopes of cash to a young woman I had never seen before. And our beloved Pastor Charles, he stood in his office alone, typing something into his computer with a look of guilt on his face. Then the screen flashed red. Performance over truth, a voice whispered behind me. I turned, and there he was again. Jesus. His eyes filled with sorrow. This is not my bride, he said. This is a stage. I wanted to look away. I wanted to defend them. I wanted to believe this was just a nightmare. But I could not deny what I saw. Why are you showing me this? I asked. His voice was like wind and thunder all at once. Because you must tell them. Tell them what? That I do not dwell in walls made by hands. I dwell in hearts. And many hearts are far from me though their mouths speak my name. The church has become a theater. The audience claps for men and forgets the truth. They dress up for each other, but they never undress before me. I broke down sobbing. I fell to my knees in the vision, ashamed of how blind I had been. All those years, I thought I was serving God. But in many ways, I had been serving a system. He knelt beside me, gently lifted my chin, and said, "You were never meant to find me through them. You were meant to know me within you." And just like that, I woke up again. Tears soaking my pillow. This time I did not keep it to myself. I started writing everything down. I wrote down every word, every image, every revelation. I prayed for courage. Then, on a Sunday morning, instead of putting on my floral dress and heading to Grace Meadow, I stayed home. Gerald did too. We sat on the back porch and read the book of Matthew aloud. That was the first Sunday I ever truly felt him. Not in the building. Not in the ritual. But in the quiet. In the simple. The following week, I gathered a few women from our Bible study and told them what I had seen. Some of them wept. Others called me blasphemous. One even said I was under the influence of something demonic. But one by one, they kept coming back. They wanted to hear more. They wanted to know him outside the stained glass and the bulletins. And that is when I realized, this was only the beginning. What Jesus showed me was not just about my church. It was a wake-up call for every believer who had gotten lost in the fog of religion and forgotten the simplicity of relationship. The place between life and lies is where most people get stuck. And unless someone shows them the way, they may never leave it. I am not saying all churches are evil. But I am saying, many are not what they seem. In chapter 3, I will tell you what happened when I confronted my pastor, and what Jesus told me to do next. Because the hardest part was not dying. The hardest part was coming back with a truth that nobody wanted to hear. By the time I walked into Grace Meadow Baptist Church again, almost 6 weeks had passed since my near-death experience. I had not come to worship. I had not come to sit in the pew or sing another hollow hymn. I came with something much heavier, a truth that refused to be silenced. It was a crisp Sunday morning. The kind where the sky looks too blue, like someone scrubbed it clean overnight. I wore a plain white blouse and navy skirt, nothing flashy. Gerald came with me. He was quiet as we drove through the small Tennessee town where we had lived for over 30 years. Every mailbox and storefront we passed reminded me of a different chapter of my life. But I could feel it in my spirit, everything was about to change. I had arranged to speak with Pastor Charles after service. He had sounded polite on the phone, but his tone had a forced cheerfulness, like someone humoring a child. I could tell he thought I was just another emotionally shaken woman trying to find clarity. He had no idea what I was about to share. Service ended with a song I used to love, "Come As You Are." The irony stung. I watched people raise their hands, sway, some even cry. But all I could feel was distance. Like I was watching a play I had already seen too many times. When the final amen echoed, I stayed seated while the crowd thinned. Pastor Charles met me in his office. Gerald stayed in the hallway. I stepped inside, and immediately, memories hit me. Baptism classes. Volunteer sign-up meetings. Counseling sessions. This office had been a second home for years. But now, it felt like a museum. Full of relics and no real presence. He smiled, motioned for me to sit. "How are you feeling, Sister Rebecca?" he asked. I looked into his eyes. I saw kindness. But also fatigue. A weight he had long grown used to carrying. "I need to tell you what I saw," I said. He nodded, folding his hands on the desk. So I did. I told him everything. I told him how I died. How I stood in the field. How Jesus looked into my soul and told me to stop going to church. I shared the visions, of hidden sin, of performance over truth, of the hollow walls we called holy. I described the dream with the hallway of churches, and the words Jesus spoke. They dress up for each other, but they never undress before me. Pastor Charles sat silently for a while. Then he took a breath and leaned back. "Sister Rebecca," he said slowly, "I do not question your experience. But perhaps it was a test. Sometimes the enemy appears as light, just to confuse us." I shook my head. "That was no demon, Pastor. That was him. I know my shepherd's voice." He frowned slightly, clearly trying to be gentle. "And what would you have me do? Close the doors? Tell everyone to stop gathering? This church helps people. We feed the hungry. We pray for the sick. We visit the prisons. I am not asking you to shut anything down," I said. "But you must wake up. This place has become a stage. You preach every Sunday, but are you preaching from your heart, or just your notes?" His face turned stiff. I continued. "I am not here to condemn you. But Jesus said you are leading people to a system, not to him. And he is not in this building anymore." For a moment, the air went completely still. Then, in a voice more defensive than he intended, Pastor Charles said, "I have given my whole life to this church." "And that is the problem," I replied. "You were never called to give your life to a building. You were called to give your life to him." That was the last thing I said before standing up and walking out. I did not slam the door. I did not raise my voice. But something in me shifted forever. When I stepped outside, Gerald stood waiting. "How did it go?" he asked. I looked up at the sky, then back at the church. "They will not change. Not yet." In the days that followed, word spread. Some people said I had gone mad. Others said I was being used by the devil. A few brave souls reached out, curious and hungry for the truth I had found. So, we started meeting in our home. No pulpit. No bulletins. No stained glass. Just people. We opened the Bible. We prayed without rushing. We cried without shame. We confessed sins. We sat in silence when we did not have the words. And somehow, in that quiet, I felt his presence stronger than I ever had inside those church walls. One night, as we sat in a circle, a woman named Lisa broke down. She had been in church for 20 years, teaching Sunday school, hosting fundraisers, leading women's retreats. But she said she had never once felt God the way she did sitting on my couch with her shoes off and her guard down. That is when I knew this was the real church. Not the building. Not the programs. Not the rituals. This. The raw. The real. The honest. And just as Jesus said, he was dwelling not in stained glass, but in hearts. Weeks turned into months. We never called ourselves a church. We did not take offerings. We did not promote anything. We just gathered, and grew. One night, I felt his presence again, so strong, so overwhelming, I dropped to my knees right there in the living room. As I wept, I heard him speak one final word to me. Tell them I am still coming back. But not for a stage. For a bride. I knew then that my purpose was not just to leave church, but to be the church. To live in truth. To love without judgment. To worship in spirit, not performance. So here I am, telling you, whoever you are, watching and listening to my story. Stop going to church, if the church is just a place you perform. Stop going, if you cannot find him there anymore. But do not stop seeking him. Do not stop knowing him. And do not stop being his. Because he is not lost. He is not hiding. He is just no longer playing along. He is calling you deeper. Out of the walls. Into the wild of real faith. And I pray, you hear him too. Thank you so much for walking this journey with me. This story was not easy to share, but it came from the deepest place in my heart. If you felt something stir while listening, please tell me in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to know what you believe. And most of all, I want you to know, you are not alone. To all my subscribers, thank you for fueling this channel with your love and support. You are my strength. And to the new and returning viewers who have not subscribed yet, I cannot wait for you to hit that subscribe button. Your presence is the fire that keeps this message alive. Stay real. Stay raw. Stay seeking. Because sometimes, the truth is waiting outside the church doors.